Good afternoon. Welcome everybody to our Main Street Economic Revitalization Grant webinar. I'm Joanne Stately and I'm the Director of Impact Strategy for the Minneapolis Foundation. And I'm going to have two of our partners also introduce themselves at this time. Kate?
Sure. Welcome everybody. My name is Kate Speed. I'm with the Twin Cities office of the Local Initiative Support Corporation. I'm a program officer on the project finance and lending side. And I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Jackson. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm a senior loan officer and financial specialist at Propel Nonprofits in Minneapolis.
So just a couple of reminders. One, we are recording this webinar, and this will be available on our website under Main Streets at the Minneapolis Foundation. And we are encouraging you to put any of your questions into the chat. And to help us get started, we want to learn a little bit about our audience. We have a very great response to this webinar. And so I'm going to ask my colleague, Sarah Gillum, to put up a few questions that we'd like you to respond to very quickly. So it looks like we're at 100% answered, so we'll end the poll and just take a quick look at the results. First question, which corridor are you primarily interested in? 53% are interested in Lake Street, 8% at 38th in Chicago, and 40% West Broadway. How would you describe yourself? We have 30% are recognizing themselves as a developer, 9% as a funder, 17% as technical assistance provider. You know, we have a big category as other. We're going to have to get a better understanding of what that means. Are you looking for pre-development funds and you had a choice, yes or no? 64% are saying yes for pre-development and 36% no. Fourth question, have you already secured matching funds and consider yourself shovel ready? 34% are saying yes and 66% are saying no. So thank you so much for participating in this poll. As again, this information is very helpful for us as we have announced the opening of our Main Street Revitalization Program. And in so doing, just a very quick overview. The Minneapolis Foundation is in partnership with Twin Cities LISC and also with Propel Nonprofits. We were very fortunate to come together and submit an application to the Department of Employment and Economic Development, and were awarded $18 million in grants to provide support for businesses that had been impacted by COVID or had experienced any type of damage as a result of the murder of George Floyd. And as you know by our survey, the development that we are focusing on are around the 3 corridors. And those 3 corridors, again, include Lake Street, and the geographic kind of description is from the Mississippi River to the Uptown neighborhood. 38th in Chicago, that represents from Bloomington Avenue from east to Nicollet Avenue and to the west. And then finally, West Broadway from I-94 on the east to Queen Avenue on the west. We want to thank Deed very much for this partnership and making this available to so many of our development efforts and rebuild efforts that are happening along these 3 corridors. I'm going to turn this over to Kate Speed, who will go over kind of what we will fund and some of our eligible expenses. So Kate?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so you can see up on the screen here listed out what this program will fund. So it's really focused on the hard costs and the construction costs of redeveloping or repairing properties. So the repair and renovation of real property, building construction, landscaping and design, as well as some pre-design and design, engineering, infrastructure, and related site amenities. So it does cover pre-development expenses related to the hard costs. Important to note, ineligible expenses are the purchase of real estate or acquisition of sites, business operations and operating expenses, inventory, wages, and working capital. So who is eligible to apply? Pretty broad definition here. It's businesses and property owners, nonprofit organizations, and developers, both for-profit and nonprofit. There's some examples here on the right-hand side. Property owner whose building was damaged by fire that wants to leverage insurance proceeds to redevelop the property. We'll get into match sources in a minute, but those insurance proceeds can be used as match. A business owner who has purchased their previously leased space and wants to remodel that space and potentially add some housing or offices above that. Nonprofit organization that has purchased a vacant property and wants to redevelop it into a community-based small business incubator. And last example is a developer that has purchased a vacant lot and wants to redevelop it into a mixed-use facility with commercial and housing. Again, those are just examples, and it goes broader than that. And if you have questions about whether you're eligible, you can certainly reach out to Joanne or one of us. So some of the additional requirements that go along with this funding is that the grant awards from Main Street can cover up to 30% of an eligible project cost, and the maximum grant award is $750,000. Projects need to demonstrate that there is some outside funding sources from public or private sources, including grants or loans, borrower, developer equity, and insurance proceeds. Main Street grants must be matched with non-state and non-federal funds at a rate of 2 to 1. Any project that receives more than $200,000 in a Main Street grant must comply with prevailing wage requirements under the Minnesota statute 17741 through 44. And we can get you more information on that. I believe it's probably on the program website with the foundation as well. Projects must have secured commitments for all of the required matching funds and all of the required development approvals before a Main Street grant will be distributed. Matching funds must be identified, committed, and restricted for use exclusively for this project, and they must be secured within 15 months of the awarding of funds. And the final important note here is that funds need to be distributed by December 31st, 2024, and that projects must be completed by December 31st, 2026.
Thanks, Kate. Let's dig in to the question of matching funds for just a few minutes. So as Kate touched on briefly, all of the Main Street grants require a 2 to 1 match. And so the funding must come from other sources besides federal or state grants. They can come from local city grants, for example, developer equity, insurance proceeds, donations, any number of areas. The match is what's important. And so there was a question, I know, in the Q&A about matching funds being secured, identified and committed at the time of the grant being awarded or dispersed, but that some funds must be committed, but they can be awarded within 15 months. So this might be, for example, if you're looking to acquire some bank financing or financing from LISC or from Propel nonprofits, the loan might not be closed and dispersed at the time you receive your Main Street grant, but it will be within 15 months. So that's kind of one of those, if you're using financing as a match, that's what that might look like. Let's go to the next slide. So I'm just going to talk through how we determine our match and what that might look like in a little bit of detail. So the first step of kind of determining what your amount of your Main Street grant request could be is to really determine your total project cost, because there's a few things at play here. We want to make sure that that first of all, we understand the total project cost. So that's step one. We can go to step two. The next part is to determine our total max amount that we could request. And so a Main Street grant must be 30% or less than the total project cost. So in this example, 30% of $2.5 million is $750,000. And so the max amount you could request would be $750,000. And coincidentally, the max amount you can request for a Main Street grant is also $750,000. But in this example, the applicant could request that full amount. Then let's go to step three. Step three is determining the sources of our funds. And so this is where that matching grant requirement and sort of math comes into play. So not only do we want to make sure that our matching grant the Main Street grant we request is 30% of the project, we also need to match the grant on a 2-to-1 basis. And so because this organization is going to request $750,000, they need to find $1.5 million in additional confirmed funding to make the whole deal work. So let's take a look at the next slide here. And this is an example that we also have posted on the website. We also have it in a worksheet format, if that's helpful for you, which I'll share in the chat when we're done here. But this kind of shows us that on the left, we have the example that is green that says our match requirement is met. We see there's a few different things at play. So our total project cost will be $2,500,000. 30% of that is $750,000, which would be the max grant request, and that is their request here. And so they also have matching funds of $1.5 million, so doubling that $750,000 Main Street grant. And then there is a gap also. So to get to the full funding of the project, they need to raise $250,000 additional dollars to be fully funded. When we look at the example on the right side that has the yellow label, we see that, for example, this organization wants a Main Street grant of $600,000, but they've only raised $900,000 in matching funds. And so they're at 150%, and they still have some money to raise before they can get to that full match. So there is a little bit of math, a little bit of fitting things together, puzzle making here at play. But part of our work here as partners for this project is to provide some technical assistance, sit down and talk through how these pieces might fit together for you. And then I will share this template for you all in the chat as well.
Thank you, Sarah. And this is also part of the pre-application. So if you go into your actual site, that same form will be available. So I'm just going to go over kind of very high level of what are kind of the steps to apply. We always encourage you to read the guidelines very thoroughly and see if you meet the requirements. And that's before, trying to reach me or any of us. That it's really more helpful that you read it versus spending time for us to try to explain what's in the guidelines. So I really strongly encourage you to do that. And then step two is, how do you access the pre-application? So the Minneapolis Foundation is providing the online access through our portal for you to get registered first as an individual and then registering your organization to be able to access the actual pre-application. Once the pre-application then is received, we will distribute these to the community tables that are the real engine behind this work in reviewing those pre-applications who have set the guidelines and are going to determine the priorities for whom they're going to recommend for funding. Step 3, if your pre-application then is approved by the community tables, that comes back to us as the partners. And the purpose for the pre-application was not to make this too overwhelming, and I realize it may seem overwhelming at this point, but we wanted to, again, provide the table for you to use to see how you could meet the match or not meet the match and what you'd actually be requesting for us. But once it's been recommended from the community tables, then there becomes another level of review. And as Sarah has mentioned, we're going to look for the completeness of the application. Are there some other types of technical assistance or support that you need? If you're asking for matching funds, what type of work can we help you to get to that match so that the state funds would be available for your project? Other important information, as I said, we began submitting applications on March 31st. You must submit these online. And again, you have to identify, who the organization is. And we have our grants management staff that is available to assist you with that online process. And I do encourage you to contact Grants Administration via the email address that's included here. It is also on our website. It's much easier for us to track the requests as they're coming in versus people trying to make phone calls. Next, Kate.
Sure, yeah, just a few other things that are important to know about this is if you are working on multiple projects in more than one corridor, or potentially all 3 corridors, you can submit individual pre-applications for each one. And they don't need to be submitted at the same time. After you submit a pre-application, you should receive an email confirmation from the foundation that it's been received. As Joanne mentioned, the community decision-making tables along each corridor will be reviewing these pre-applications to make recommendations to the Minneapolis Foundation. That includes the 38th Street United Group, the Lake Street Recovery Leadership Group, and Destination Northside Coalition. And I believe we'll be making or providing some information about that about those groups as well. And then selected projects will be evaluated more closely for compliance with grant guidelines, similar to what Joanne mentioned, just to dig in on the kind of final pieces before disbursement is made.
Okay, so I have a few questions lined up for us here in our Q&A and in our chat. One question is, let me see. Okay, good question here. The question is about funds currently being spent. Like if you already have insurance funds being allocated to a project, what would that look like? And Kate, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so match funding can go back all the way to March of 2020. So funds that have been expended specifically for the purposes that are eligible under Main Street, and that could include insurance proceeds that you've already used to do some repairs or redevelopment on, pre-development funding that you've secured previously and may have spent, like those would be eligible match sources. So you can go backwards. There's a look back here for the match.
Excellent. And can you repeat that date for us, Kate?
March of 2020. Joanna, is there a specific date in March?
It's when the government shut down. I believe it was like March 20th when it was officially kind of shut down.
When all this fun began.
Right. But I mean, we'd also have, kind of the issue of COVID. I mean, COVID, it was kind of before that time, before the actual shutdown, but it's towards the end of March for sure. I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact date.
Okay, are we ready for another question here? The next question is a question of timing. So could Main Street grants be awarded contingent on other grants being applied for and approved? It sounds kind of like a timing question.
So we would look at what the package looks like initially coming in, and then would estimate kind of where you're at in raising those other funds. We can make the commitment, but we can't distribute any of the 18 million that we have until all commitments are in place.
Great. Thanks, Joanne. Another question here is a question about sort of the geography. So it seems like we might want to create some sort of map that helps us to visualize the corridors. But there's a question is if you're close to the corridor but not quite in it, does that sort of dock you points in the pre-application, or does it make you ineligible?
So again, we're relying on those community tables, you know, along 38th Street and Lake Street and Broadway, who've identified what their priorities for funding are going to be. And if we think there's something that is very close to that, I mean, we certainly have an opportunity to have a conversation with those tables. But again, in thinking about impact and how we had framed kind of our request to deed, we were really looking specifically along the corridors first. But again, it's the tables that will make those decisions. So I think one said Minnehaha, I'm not sure quite where along Minnehaha and as it intersects with Lake Street. But certainly I would encourage people, you know, to contact me so we can just have kind of that brief conversation. But I wouldn't think that this is going to go very deep beyond kind of those initial quarters specifically as we're thinking of the priorities for funding.
Okay, can you, or Joanne rather, probably, would you remind us the total amount of funding that's currently available?
18 million.
Excellent, thank you.
From the state. Again, that's funds from the state. And as we mentioned, and Kate Speed has talked about this a little bit, we are also, you know, looking for, you know, what other funding is going to be available. The Minneapolis Foundation, through this partnership and on our website, are looking for people to support other types of grants to provide match to organizations through this process. So we do have the state funding, and we're also looking at raising other dollars to support organizations, but we don't have a commitment to say we've got another 18 million available to do that. That's why having existing funds aligned in your request makes your application much easier to process and easier to complete, I think, within the deadline and to get this work out the door faster. So that was one of the questions why we're asking for what projects are shovel ready, but also at the same recognizing the importance of those that aren't quite there and why pre-development is important to this work as well.
Is there an application due date, and do we anticipate the money running out very quickly?
The application does not have a due date. It's an ongoing process. If we look like the funds are kind of being rapidly deployed, we would put an announcement out about when we think we would perhaps remove the ongoing and might go to a more scheduled time to receive grants. But for now, it's ongoing, and we're going to be looking. We want to make sure that there are funds available for all three corridors. So it's not like hurry up, get in, be first in, and then the money's gone. We are going to be kind of metering and monitoring that process throughout. I can say right now we have one application that has been successfully submitted, and I think it's about 20 that are in process across the three corridors.
Thanks, Joanne. That brings up a great question. When you have submitted your question and you are shovel ready, you have matching funds secured, when might applicants expect to hear back on their pre-application?
So you should get a notice immediately saying that your pre-application has been successfully submitted. We then monitor these kind of daily. We would like to provide a heads up to the tables to let them know how many applications that we have that are ready to review, working with the tables on their scheduled timeframes as well to review and score and then provide their recommendations back to us. I think in generally speaking, I would say that from the time that an application is submitted. We'd like to have that application to the committee within 2 weeks, give them 2 weeks to review, and then to get back to us. And then we will inform you kind of what the decision is at that time.
Thanks, Joanne. Okay, so we've answered a few of these along the way here. Does an organization need to own its space in order to be eligible for funding for a renovation or other structural costs?
Okay, do you want to take that one?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Sorry, I was just
Sure.
writing.
Yeah, of course. Do you need to be a building owner to apply for these funds?
No, you don't need to own the building outright, but you do need to have site control as evidenced by a purchase agreement or straight ownership, or you can be a tenant in a building, but you'll need landlord approval.
Great, thanks, Kate. Okay, there's been, let's see. I'm just scrolling here.
Sarah, I did see a question on prevailing wage. Why do we have that? That's a requirement of the state and its funding. And in particular, we identify that if it's a project that's over 200,000, that is going to be specifically applied. But we do ask that in each of the pre-applications. Are you going to provide and monitor for prevailing wages on your project?
Thanks, Joanne. Kate, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about pre-development costs. There's a question that specifically talks about scoping the project, site selection, that kind of stuff. Is that work that would be supported by pre-development funds?
Yeah, we are anticipating that, there's sort of a broad range of pre-development expenses. So we're going to be looking specifically for third-party expenses, things like design and architecture, survey, legal. It won't cover project internal staff, project management costs. So we're going to be looking for invoiceable costs because they'll need to be backup documentation for those disbursements.
Thanks, Kate. Can a tenant and an owner apply separately for funding?
Yes, yes, they can. But I think we would then look, is the tenant looking at tenant improvements? We might ask, have they had a conversation with the owner who could also make that request, since they're going to be benefiting from the renovations that could take place in that particular business. But the answer to that, yes.
Thanks. There's another question. Can you talk a little bit more about the economic revitalization aspect of our guidelines? For instance, would a housing-only project be an eligible project, assuming it meets all the other guidelines?
Could you say that again?
Sure. Talking a little bit more about the economic revitalization goals of the program, and for example, would a housing-only project be an eligible project?
I would say again that that's up to the priorities of each of the tables of how they want to look at that use. They may decide that they might want to focus on businesses first and then consider housing, or that they may choose to consider any of those opportunities that we've identified in the pre-application. So there is nothing in our guidelines right now that says one has a priority over the other, but some of those decisions could be made as they're being reviewed at the community tables. And if that was an issue, we would inform applicants that this may not be something that's being recommended at this point. It may be on the next tier of recommendations.
Thanks, Joanne. Okay, I'm just scanning the chat a little bit here. We've had a few more things come in. Do we have a map of the areas eligible for funding, or is that something we might be producing at some point?
It definitely can produce those. And again, it would be in collaboration with the tables if they want to get that, you know, very specific, or if they want to kind of broaden the guidelines. But yes, we can certainly do that.
And that's it's a good reminder to just, you know, if you do have questions about geography specifically, to check in with the community table closest to the area you're looking at.
There was a question by Russ, I thought, but I didn't see what it was. Did we answer that?
I believe so. It was a comment.
Okay.
That was for us. There's a question about that just came through here. We have a project that received significant funding prior to 2020, but it has been delayed by the pandemic and other factors. Are those funds we could count as matching funds?
Not according to kind of how I would interpret the guidelines. But I think that would be a conversation we'd probably want to have.
Yeah, I would say
further clear.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I think just generally, we're not trying to be exclusionary, but we're trying to understand kind of what the universe is and kind of how that, but then it would align with what these priorities and again, with the funds that are available to grant.
Exactly. Okay. Can you just talk a little bit, Joanne, I know we kind of touched on it, but just what folks might expect after they submit an application? Will they receive a follow-up email from you or from the community table? What can folks expect?
So again, the initial email will come and be generated once they submit that. I was not intending to do another follow-up with the organizations. My next intent would be after the community committees have made their recommendation is when I would be contacting individuals. So it's not necessary that you have to ask necessarily what the status is, because these will be going on a rolling basis, so they're not all going to be on the same kind of time frame. But again, if you feel that something may be going on too long, you're certainly open to contact me directly. But do again acknowledge that there are steps in this process to get to a yes, and then for pre-development, or whether it's a pre-development or for other hard construction costs, what we will then be asking you for follow-up information to make your pre-application into full application complete.
Thanks, Russ, for clarifying that in chat. There was a question in Russ's comment here. So there is something on the website that says projects not recommended for funding will be considered for alternative support and other technical assistance. Could you say a little bit more about this?
Sure. You know, we are all in this work, and we've been in this work before the great award that came through DEED as intermediaries like LISC and Propel and the work of the Minneapolis Foundation. So we all are very much committed to economic vitality across our communities. So that's part of our other work. So that's kind of what that question relates to. It doesn't mean that we can promise that there are matching funds or other things, but we'd like to be able to see what other options you may have through our regular work among these three partners. It's not absolutely guaranteed, but again, we want to have maybe no for Main Street, but it may be a yes for some other opportunities for you.
Great question. How is the grant being promoted among non-English speaking communities, specifically Spanish speaking owners and tenants along Lake Street?
So that is kind of a step for us that we said that we will consider that and want to work with our partners to see what that demand is. And we are certainly open to doing that. Initially, our goal was to get this thing up as soon as possible. And I'm certainly open to have those conversations, and that, again, we will provide for that support, that technical assistance to make sure that that can be available for people where English is not their primary language.
Yep. Can you talk a little bit about how we might assist businesses after the award? Do we stay with the grantees throughout the project through completion?
So that is a very good question. And that is certainly our desire and how we want to make sure that this project is going to be successful. And I also would say it's an expectation from DEED because we are accountable for reporting on the projects and where they're at, their status, and their completion.
Excellent. Yes, a lot of our rules come from DEED directly.
And there's some, you know, they're good rules. There's some good rules, and then we have some of our own best practices that can be layered on top of that as well. Absolutely.
I'm having a lull in our questions right now. Kate, I'm wondering if it might be helpful to talk a little bit more about, for folks, some of the eligible expenses or maybe where we would find matching grant funds.
Sure, yeah, so some of the, on the pre-development side, if you have received a We Love Lake Street grant, or potentially another COVID-related relief grant that may be able to be eligible. LISC has some recoverable grants, which are 0% loans for pre-development. That can also be an eligible source that we can talk about. If you already have one, you can use it as match, most likely. And if you need one, we should talk. Those are in the kind of $30,000 to $40,000 range typically. We'll be looking at borrower, you know, equity and other, if there's other crowdsourcing or other fundraising that you've done for pre-development. On the larger capital grant side, we anticipate that the city's commercial property development fund will be used as match. Bank financing, New Markets tax credits are eligible as match.
I'll also add in there that Propel nonprofits, where I work, we have a loan fund as well. And we are a nonprofit that lends to other nonprofits. So if that is the type of organization that you have, that we lending from Propel could be an option for you as well, as far as match is concerned.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. That's a really good point. So other small business CDFIs, potentially private equity or private loan sources can be matched. What can't be matched is ARPA funded projects. And the county has one out right now called the Community Investment Initiative. Unfortunately, will not be able to be used as match. If there's other ARPA funded, federally funded programs, federal earmarks cannot be used as match. A number of projects are receiving those. Other state programs, if there's direct appropriations, could not be used as match. And we do need to clarify with the city, most of their CPDF, I believe, is non-ARPA. And that's the hope, is to keep it non-ARPA moving forward, but we'll just need to make sure that that's the case. There may be some portion of the CPDF fund that is ARPA funded.
A quick follow-up, Kate, does that mean that ARPA funds could be used for the project, but just not count as the match?
Correct. Yeah, correct. Yes.
Can you tell us what ARPA means?
Yeah, it's American Rescue Plan Act, sort of a, yes, thank you. I'm sorry about that. It was the federal recovery legislation that came with a lot of funding, and that's primarily coming through public agencies. So it's coming through the state, city, county, and some of the suburban cities as well. Great.
A great question about applying for pre-development funds. So if an organization plans to apply for pre-development funds, can they just apply for the pre-development portion of the project to start and then apply for the potentially more or the rest of the funds as the project is getting started? Or Can you only submit one application?
Yeah, you can submit 2 applications. So if you come in for pre-development and get an award, let's say you get a $25,000 award, that the maximum grant amount overall is still $750,000. So when you come back in for the larger capital grant, you'd need to subtract the amount that you've already received.
Great. Can an SBA loan used as match?
It's a good question. I don't think so. We should probably
It's
confirm
federal.
that.
Again, if we're thinking of either federal or state dollars, no. But realizing, and this goes back to, I think, another question, if you could use dollars, the maximum is $750. So if you meet all those matching requirements for $750, but your project is more than that, you can have as much federal and state funds as you want. We just have to make sure that you've covered with non-state or federal dollars to get to that $750,000 match.
That's a great point, Joanne. So just to repeat, if you're applying for the full $750,000 in grant, the $1.5 million in match funds cannot be state or federal. But if the program, if the project costs more than those two pieces together, you can have any funding you'd like to fill the rest of the gaps.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay.
I do want to refer people to our website for more questions. We do have a list of frequently asked questions on there as well, and we will continue to update those as we get questions that we haven't been able to address either through this webinar as things continue to evolve, through this process. The kind of opportunity for this to continue to grow, to be responsive to the community is something that we want to be able to do and to be challenged by that. So again, I want to encourage people to, check out the full website and go to our MinneapolisFoundation.org Main Street website for more clarification on this program. And can I have the time? How are we doing on time?
We're at 12:45 right now. So there, I'm not seeing any more question updates, although there was a good question. Could a webinar like this be a routine, something that we might do some quarterly reports throughout the grant period? We haven't considered that before.
That's a
good idea, Assad.
Great suggestion. And I think that's really good, how to report back and kind of give a standing, because we will be giving reports to DEED. So I would say we will definitely do our best to do that on a regular basis.
Absolutely. Okay, I will post the website here again for folks in the chat. And then there have been some questions along the way if we'll be sharing the presentation. I believe we'll be sharing both the slides and then a recording of the presentation today as well on the website.
It'll be on our website. It will be posted on our website as another reference for people to look at and to review.
Excellent, excellent. Well, if folks have more questions, please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A function. Otherwise, I think we are probably about ready to wrap up.
I think I saw a question, I think, pop up on new rules, and I don't know if the location is Lowry, and thinking about that, I know that Destination Northside has a much larger geographic area. That's true for what they're doing. We have submitted a second application to DEED, and we will know about whether or not that's been approved probably by mid-May. We specifically in that request extended beyond the existing 3 corridors to include larger portions of North Minneapolis, Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, along Franklin Avenue, and also along Cedar Riverside. So if that funding is approved, that would kind of then allow for some of these other projects to be considered with additional funding.
I'm also providing a link here in the chat. There's a listing here from DEED's website about the other organizations that received first round funding. And so there was a question about, businesses that have been affected in St. Paul, for example. And we know that within about the next month, the St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation will be announcing a similar program and round of funding for that corridor as well. And so kind of stay tuned to keep your ear to the ground about just Main Street funding in general, because we're not the only ones that have it.
Well, if we don't have any more questions, there's something about IT and taxpayers would be eligible. Is there an immigration status required? That's a very good question.
It is a good question. It seems like they would be, but maybe we need to double check with DEED on that.
Well, but I think, and yes, we'd have to check with DEED. But again, from my perspective, again, if we're looking at the criteria, if you have ownership and you want to invest, we don't ask about citizenship on that. We ask, do you have site control, and who the owners could be is not something that has come up in any of the guidelines, but we can definitely clarify and check with that. And we can post that up as FAQ, is a very good FAQ question.
And then I think we've answered this question, but we'll do it again. Is the funding available on a first come first served basis, or what's the plan for the funds?
So the plans are, to make sure that we are allowing enough of the funds to be kind of equitably distributed across the various corridors. It's not a race necessarily for it to be the first come, first serve. You may come in, but you may also not be recommended for funding initially. So we will be monitoring and kind of reviewing that process and how the funds will be kind of recognized and distributed. Just using very simple math, I know Kate had come up with a figure. If we were to distribute all this funds and get these out the door by that December 31st deadline of 2024, we would have to approve how many projects?
Like 26 projects.
6 projects. At the maximum, at 750,000 each. And we are expecting a number of these requests to be not at that $750,000 level, so there'll be more. So right now, that's not our concern, but we will be watching it.
Well, and that's a good reminder, Joanne, too, that there is a maximum amount that is awarded, but there's no minimum. So if you do have a small project that might qualify and you have some matching funds, this is a great opportunity to close the gap on any size project.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's true. We've had 20 applications, but they're at all various different stages and requests. And again, those applications have to go through the review committees and to see if they want to forward those or not forward those or hold those. And that's why we also said, and they may not fit the guidelines at all.
Joanne, I'm sorry if I missed this, but did you say that we're gonna that you will be posting periodically, maybe weekly, what the balance available, maybe the balance committed and the balance available of the program? I think
that could be part of those kind of update reports, what we have obligated for funding up to this point. As I said, we'll be monitoring that regularly.
Great. I don't know if Kate or Joanne, you've received any questions via private message, but my list has been exhausted here.
No, but I can just add a couple other phone conversations that I've had, and we may have addressed this. There are some individuals that are out there that are actually consulting and working with various clients on behalf of the 3 corridors. And the question is, do they register on behalf of their clients? And my recommendation is No, you register the business that is going to be, that's actually requesting the money. They may be the contact person for the application, but it's much better for them not to try to look like they've got 15 different requests if they're working with that many different organizations and helping them to secure funds through this process. And again, you could have multiple requests across the corridors. But we'd also, where's your priority, and really consider first, how close are you, and again, meeting the criteria, the guidelines. If you're really just starting, the pre-development is a good place to start, but also keep in mind, kind of the deadline when things all have to be in place for us to commit the funds and distribute them, and will your project be completed within that time period? Some of these may be may take a longer time period. And that's why we were saying that we'll look for some other avenues if that seems to be the case.
Excellent.
So I think we've probably gone through then most of the applications or the questions.
Yep, I don't have any others here. Kate, did you have any others?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Well, with that, again, I want to say thank you much to Kate and to Sarah for being part of this webinar. And also thanks to the people that signed up and have participated today. We really appreciate you taking time out of your very, very busy schedules to listen to this presentation. We would like to be able to get some of your feedback as well. And so you may get a survey after this. We have your registration and to contact you, so how we can make this opportunity and communicating about this resource better. So with this again, I'll say thank you, Kate, thank you, Sarah. Thanks to the staff here at the Minneapolis Foundation for putting up this webinar and all their expertise, and to you that are all on the ground, the community tables, and all the businesses that are out there that are trying to really make our community as vibrant as it can be. So I'll say thank you, and good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.